Several of these participants are with me here today. They want to share with you their perspectives. Please introduce yourselves to the audience, panel, and explain your role in Lock Shields.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Major Bill Kieber. I was the Blue Team 22 team lead for the exercise.
Hi, my name is Noah King. I was the defer lead for the exercise. I was currently a member of the DISA Red Team and previously a member of the DISA Incident Response Team.
My name is Emma Meadows. I'm a student at Marshall University. I study cyber forensics and security, and I was on the digital forensics team.
Hi, my name is Jack McPhee. I'm a student at Marshall University studying a master's in cyber forensics and security, and I was on the DFIR team as well.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Savant. I was a part of setting up Lock Shields and then also sitting at the Linux Tier 2 table during exercise.
I'm Scott Fleming, and I'm the least technical individual up here. I am the facilitator with higher ed institutions with this event, and I'm there for the event, but I'm more of a strategic observer.
With respect to my role in the exercise as the Director for the Office of Strategic Outreach and Talent Acquisition in the Workforce Services Directorate at DISA, our office budgeted for and competitively selected 12 interns with more than 30 others volunteering their time from Marshall University, West Virginia University, West Virginia Tech, University of Hawaii, and University of Maryland Global Campus. The exercise bolstered these interns' skills development, giving the university students participating a practitioner's perspective. These interns will be at DISA as employees for 120 days, both learning and working to support the agency's mission assurance efforts. And now to our panel questions. The first question I have for you is, why do you think, from your diverse personal perspectives, the Lock Shields exercise is critical for us to participate in?
So I think that Lock Shields gives a technical analyst a very unique opportunity to see broad-scale potential impacts of the work that he's doing on a day-to-day basis. For example, if you work in the energy industry, how might your industry relate with the armed forces? So I think that's a relatively unique and interesting opportunity for the analysts.
I'll say that it's one of these events where you can take theory about what should be done and then actually try to apply it. And so the event itself is really like a sandbox scrimmage exercise where you can try different things, different setups, different command and control to see what might work best when you have this collaboration between the various groups. And if we look forward as to where things may go, I think these collaborations are important, and holding these events continues to hone our skill sets. And I'll say this, it's not a static environment, it's very dynamic. We've been doing this now for several years, and each year we incorporate new challenges into the environment. And I think it's very beneficial for all those involved.
I'll say as a student, kind of what Scott said, the theory of learning to do something is a lot different than doing it and knowing how to do it and having that confidence that you know how to do it. So for me, still being in my undergraduate degree, it was invaluable to be able to, I know it's a simulated experience, it's very simulated, you're watching the screens, you're watching what's going on, and you kind of get like the heat coming on, like the stress of, it feels very real, and I don't think I would have gotten that experience anywhere else than a simulated environment like this.
And then just piggybacking off of that, as a student, as far as the collaborative efforts go, getting to see a bunch of different industry people and different branches of our government and military all in one room was an awesome experience, just to be able to talk to those people, see what their perspectives are, see where our futures are going, and kind of get the hands-on experience that we need and that employers are looking for later on.
Yeah, your environment is going to be very dynamic, and a lot of the problem sets that you think are going to be good on your part end up being not so good. And your box that you sit on may have a web server, and if you're not familiar with that, then better figure it out. So, and start talking to the people around you. So that collaboration is very key.
Yeah, the exercise does a very good job of exercising the whole cybersecurity framework. In scenario, you're there to assist a fictitious company, as the video stated, so you have limited knowledge. You do not own the network. So you're kind of dropped in, almost parachuted in last minute, kind of quickly have to figure out what's going on in the environment, how it's configured, how it's set up, how it's operated. All of that's done by design to generate quick reactive thinking and plan on the fly, if you will. So it does a good exercise of quickly assessing a situation, evaluating it, making sure that you exercise the full cybersecurity framework all the way through responding and recovering these systems, because the red teams do take them down. And not only that, we have to communicate that to strategic decision makers, to the public affairs media office, and also to the legal team to determine legal implications. So they do a really good job at ensuring that information collaboration is equally important as what the blue team defends on the technical component.
I know this wasn't one of the questions that I sent to you guys earlier. Major Keeber, could you tell me and tell the audience, from your memory, I know I listed academia and private industry and Department of Defense and federal agencies. What were the organizations that participated in this year's Lock Shields event?
Absolutely. We had the largest amount of contributing organizations that we've had to date. Everyone from Department of Defense, and when you start trickling that down, DISA, Joint Force Headquarters, DODIN, all services, Army, Air Force, Marines, active duty, Army Reserve, DHS, CISA was there, U.S. Treasury was there. That's just on the federal government side, along with all the academic universities listed, WVU, Marshall, WVU Tech, University of Hawaii, University of Maryland, Global Campus. But we also had corporations like Aerospace that does some work for DoD, and some of those folks are formerly from NASA. So we've definitely had the largest talent pool that we've had to date with smart individuals. But that's just to name a few, only because some of these folks, as a military reservist or a National Guard member, they're working in industry for various organizations. Microsoft, had a gentleman from Amazon, a couple folks from CrowdStrike. It was just vast amounts of folks helping out that, you know, as a National Guard and reservist, they're also in private industry, working day in and day out, bringing that diverse skill set and those perspectives. So,
along that same line, how did you prepare? Each one of you is going to have a different story to tell, I imagine. Some of you longer than others. I think you're already starting to think about Lock Shields 24. But how did you prepare for Lock Shields 2023?
I'll let the other folks go first.
I can start. From a student perspective, I'm sure Emma will agree with this. Really, our preparation started with our smaller competitions that we've been doing as part of our campus collegiate cyber defense competition team. A lot of the skills that we utilize in those competitions on a much smaller scale, we were very surprised to find had a lot of applicability to the actual event. Em and I focused on the DFIR, like CTF style stuff, challenges that they gave us to complete during the exercise. And it was really interesting turning to like our neighbors that had years of experience in industry, and they're using the same tools that we're using in our competitions. And so that really prepared us a lot. And then this year, I also participated for 2022. But for this year, having a lot more training, we had a lot more Teams meetings. We had the week before was a lot different than we did last year, where we actually came in and sat down and got an idea of what it was like to be up all night, drinking multiple Monsters, Red Bulls to stay awake. So overall, just the academia really and education that we had, our background prepared us quite a bit for what we did as part of the exercise.
I should mention that the exercise occurred on NATO time. Talon time. So you were up and prepped at 1 in the morning?
Yes, we started to arrive at 1 a.m. and the game net opened at 2 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
Yeah. A lot of what I have to say from a student perspective is very similar to Jack. I am a little bit behind of what he's had in coursework, so I think some of what I had was like, oh, I learned this in class, but like the vast majority of like when I was faced with a challenge and I knew how to solve it came from smaller cyber competitions that were done outside of my typical coursework or responsibilities. So much like I would be faced with a problem, be like, I've done this, I did this in NCL, or I did this in, you know what I'm saying? So cyber competitions, they teach you those like niche little skills that you're thinking, when am I going to need to use this? And that's when you're going to need to use this. But yeah, other than that, cyber competitions were the main of my prep, and learning how to be awake from 1 a.m. to about 11 a.m. working was definitely an adjustment. This was my first year doing lock shields.
I'll take a higher level perspective. When we look at this, you've got the prevent, detect, correct, communicate, control aspect of what's going on. And so at a higher level, you look at world events, and you start to look at what we've done in previous years. You start to anticipate what may be added to the environment for the following year. So then what we do is we talk a little bit about what skills might be necessary for an effective team to actually have. And that's where really the onus is on Major Keeber, because he has to start to begin to catalog these various skills, identify the gaps, start to identify redundancies of, if this person can't make it to the event, then who else can come? And the benefit of actually going through this is that at the end of the day, when it's over, you now have this group of individuals who know and understand each other's skill sets, who are now out actually, like from the National Guard perspective, working in industry. They know who to call when something pops up, or if something pops up that they're not familiar with, they've got a colleague elsewhere that they can get in touch with and help tackle these problems.
Yeah, you don't know how to prep for something like this until you've either done it before, or somebody kind of gives you hints and ideas on what it is. But even then, it's not your network. And that's kind of a big play in all of this, is you can have ideas of what you would do on your network or your company, but you get into a different country's network, and we run into problem sets like passwords. We have different keyboards than some other countries. And so what I ended up doing was I helped develop a web server for some backups, and then on top of that, I just got into some of the tools that we would be using, and then also just going back to some of the basics, some system administrator stuff, some tricks on the Linux side that, a red team would probably think about doing, and just get smart on that stuff and just have a more broad scope of knowledge.
Good.
Yeah, so details of the technical environment aren't really released until pretty soon prior to the event. So kind of the prep ends up, for me, being more so trying to identify what tools you want to bring along that are going to be versatile enough to get the job done regardless. So there's a lot of time getting familiarized, and we have some training sessions and everything leading up to the event, trying to iron out what roles and responsibilities that we can. So those are kind of some of the steps I think that were important for us.
Absolutely, and then there's always the things of real-world missions going on. So, as articulated earlier, relying on somebody to be there, and then all of a sudden, last-minute shift in mission, and they can no longer be there. Making sure that there's built-in resiliency in there. So, it's quite a challenging exercise from all aspects.
So I know this may only apply to a few of you, but what improvements did you make in planning and execution this year over last?
Does anyone want to?
Go ahead.
I can
you go ahead and I'll follow up.
Yes. No, as Mr. McPhee and Ms. Emma Meadows articulated earlier, there was a lot more meetings and collaboration ahead of time this year. We did our best within budget and resourcing to make sure that tools were available sooner than later, and even then we ran into those challenges. But having that coordination and trying to get folks together ahead of time is something that we did, that we made an incremental improvement on this year, and actually doing a real in-person face-to-face where people can see each other 1 month before the event was something that we changed from previous years.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. There was a focus in on tools. There was a focus in on proper intentional communications. You know, I think in years past we've perhaps had too many channels of communications, and Major Keeber was able to rationalize that down a little bit. The networking from regular meetings that went on, and then we actually had the scrimmage. We had a scrimmage before the Lock Shields event where it was supposed to help people get used to what was going to be going on. And I would say that year over year, the incremental change in performance was significant. I feel like the team as a whole this year did a great job of getting more work done with less chaos, because they were more in tune with each other. And that has to do with the prep leading up to the event itself.
So interagency collaboration is a huge theme of our Lock Shields team, the U.S. Lock Shields team. It can be both a benefit and a challenge, I would assume. Please comment on how interagency collaboration worked or didn't in this setting.
So one of the things that I kind of found sort of inspiring actually about the exercise was how the different groups that came together to be involved sort of kind of forged a one team identity throughout the exercise. There was very little, I didn't feel any ego issues, anything of the sort. So we kind of all kind of united with the common goal of kind of putting our best foot forward and making this thing happen. So that was a pretty cool thing to see. Overall, I thought it actually worked really well, the interagency communication and the collaboration.
Absolutely. And I think Mr. King hit the nail on the head. Having a group of people that come in ready to operate together, kind of self-identifying where their strengths are, where they can provide assistance to the team, and then being flexible enough and modular in our concept allowed us to plug and play different organizations and different capabilities across the different areas that we had to drill in on, whether it's digital forensics or advanced threat hunting, with the DHS team helping out with their, the Army Corps of Engineers brought some of their pen testing and red team folks, so they were off doing their scans and looking things from their perspectives. So allowing people to nest in a modular fashion in areas to where they can excel, provided that synchronization, and offering that collaborative platform to where we can all chat together, provided that unity of effort. Because everyone comes working off different systems, different tools, they come with different backgrounds, so we tried to hit as much as we could that was kind of the common denominator across platforms and industries, whether that's just simply working through Outlook and Excel through email, or Microsoft Teams, or Slack if we need to for open channel communications. It just really, we tried to keep it to the most common denominator for all folks and what they're comfortable with.
Something I loved about this was when you were working on a problem set, sometimes you would just put it into a Slack channel and somebody would just step up to the plate, and together you go, okay, we'll figure this out. And if those two ran into a problem and that ball just kept getting pushed, and it never needed somebody to push it along, it just kind of naturally occurred by people being willing to just help and support whatever problem sets were coming up.
And then, I mean, Em and I didn't really have a huge technical role in this. we learned a lot from it, but we didn't have like a hands-on into the network per se. But sitting there watching everybody around us, one of the best things I found that Lock Shields brought was that we were all in the same room together. And that doesn't happen a lot. A lot of times, people from DFIR are in a completely separate building across the country from maybe their strategic command center. So it really gave the opportunity for us to, if we had a problem during the exercise, get up, walk over to that person, like there's something in banking that we in DFIR noticed, and we need to communicate that. It's not sending a Slack message or anything like that. It was get up, walk over, explain what's happening. And it gave us the opportunity to connect with a lot of people that we wouldn't normally get to see, especially from like a leadership perspective, or turning around and seeing like the communications people working on stuff that we just did, and watching them like actually put that into action was really eye-opening to see how everything's interconnected. And I think the agencies did a really great job. We talked in preparation for this. We had talked about how having all these different organizations and stuff that normally are working on their own, working together is going to benefit us in the future when something actually happens. There's the saying, it's not if, it's when. So there's going to be a point in time where we need to come together across military, across private organizations to protect the country, and this really prepares us for that.
So this may be a slightly off-script question, and I apologize in advance. What do you feel is the benefit to inviting participation from academia and from interns in this particular exercise?
Actually, I'll take that one. So I'm also a student with UMGC. This is an interesting one because with the Army and as a student, this exercise gave me the ability to reach out to all different spectrums that I've been a part of throughout my career. And what's interesting is it allowed me to touch things that I wouldn't normally get to touch and talk to people that I wouldn't normally get to talk to, because in the Army you may have a problem set and that's your problem set. In school you may have this is your learning path, and if you want to explore outside of that, great, but that's outside of what you would normally be studying. And this is just such an interesting way to see what you really like and what you are really good at, and definitely what you're not good at.
I'll make this comment. The U.S. is broad, it's diverse. The economy is larger than anyone else's. The other competitors, the other countries that participate in this, they often have dedicated teams, but their populations are often much smaller. Through the involvement of higher ed with this, it's a twofold process. We get something out of it too. The students actually get to do experiential learning in a very meaningful way that helps support the country. But we can also then see what areas we need to modify within the curriculum, and what we can take then back to maybe perhaps research, so then what we're looking at is then beneficial going forward. So it's very symbiotic in that regard. The students, quite honestly, get a lot more practice than some of the folks in industry because they're going through these competitions more, but they're not as involved in this. And it's more than just the technicals behind keyboards, but we also involve legal and media too. And so you're involving some folks that perhaps wouldn't see this sort of exercise anywhere else, particularly on the legal side. They pose very interesting questions, and it allows them to be involved in a much deeper way than what they would normally do in going through the curriculum preparing for the bar. This takes them far beyond their comfort zone.
And I think Dr. Fleming has a really good point. One of the things that makes this unique and gives an opportunity not only for students but the technical defender is that moment to where in the heat of moment they have to stop and think and translate, meaning translate this to somebody in the public affairs that may have to have more layman's term vocabulary or something that a senior manager, so when they're tunnel visioned in the problem set itself, they have to take a pause, think about it, okay, how do I articulate this? Because I have a media person or I have a legal person asking me what's going on in this problem set, but yet I have to explain it in more of a sort of layman and senior management perspective as an operational impact or a so what. So that really gives both the defender and the student that sort of perspective and sort of that experience to actually stop and think differently than what they get in the classroom or in day-to-day work where they're going through routine day-to-day operations.
From a selfish perspective, being responsible for talent acquisition for DISA, we're responsible in part for helping to nurture and create the next generation DoD cyber workforce, right? So I lobby for and fight for participation for interns, paid participation for interns in this event, because truthfully, if you were to survey a classroom of 50 college students, maybe 2 of them have heard about DISA. Maybe 2 of them know that we're a 20,000 person, $12 billion organization involved in such critical mission areas. So I think the exposure to DISA, to practical application of cyber defense, for a student at least, I think is invaluable.
If I can just jump in there, as far as the experience goes and like getting to experience what the federal government's like, getting to experience like the hiring process, even though it's
we
just
shall not speak about the hiring process.
I won't go in detail, but getting to experience all of that really sets us up. And I pushed as the graduate student for my program, or graduate assistant. I was in charge of like recruiting people from our program to come. I mean, they were recruiting us, but then I was recruiting our students to be like, hey, you should go. And a lot of them were super worried that they didn't have the skill set or the knowledge to go into this. I mean, it's a big exercise. I told them about last year, and that's where I was at last year. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. I can't do this. But getting to sit there and tell them like, hey, you don't need to know exactly what's going on. You're a student. This is an opportunity for you to learn. There are people there that do understand what's going on, and it's your job to sit there and learn from them and make an experience out of that. Yes, you can help, and they're going to push you into positions where you are able to help, which we definitely were. But the biggest thing that we take out of it as students is getting to see the process, getting to meet people. I mean, I've met so many people from DISA. I've got so many cards still in my wallet from Lock Shields. But that's the biggest thing we take out of it. And
so that you're my lead-in man. So before we ask for questions, I'd like to ask you what your biggest takeaway is, your biggest lesson learned, your biggest takeaway from this event, from your participation, from your perspective.
I mean, just to finish my thought with that, my biggest takeaway was if you're a student or you're continuing education or anything like that, take the opportunities that come about. These are few and far between, but when you have the opportunity to do something like this, don't let what you think may be your skill limit stop you from participating, because it's such an invaluable experience. And I've learned so much, gotten so many opportunities like this. This is crazy. Didn't think I would ever be speaking in front of a bunch of people. But yeah, I mean, take the opportunities that you get.
I'll speak to what Jack just said. From my experience, you know more than you know. You know more than you think you know. So I went into it thinking I don't know anything because I don't have experience in this and that. And when you're in this situation, you know more than you think you know. And for me, not only did I get the confidence in what I do know, I learned what I don't know. So I get to go home and learn those things that I don't know. Next year, I'm going to be a lot more well-rounded and prepared for something like this. So I both gained that kind of confidence to do something I probably wouldn't have done otherwise because I've had this experience, and I also have some skills to take home and polish up.
I think a big takeaway for me is if you have a problem set, you might be very technical, but how do you convey that to the people around you? Because at the end of the day, if you can fix it or you can't fix it, that's not what really matters, because you have to report it during the exercise. The same way that you would report it in a company, DOD, it doesn't matter. You have to know how to communicate these technical things, and sometimes in a non-technical manner and very quickly. And then on top of that, so probably my biggest takeaway is not putting everything into a hard category. A lot of the time I found myself going from a cyber role to a system administrator role to all these different roles that, there's an overarching cyber to it, but, I sat next to a WVU system administrator for a large computing company, and he was right there beside me, and I had to ask him some complicated questions, and he was there to fix them. So that was my big takeaway.
I think one of the things that Jake alluded to earlier is that you can never really be fully prepared for lock shields. There's something for everybody to learn. You can be the best technical analyst in the whole group, and you're going to run into some challenge with a communication problem that you just did not see coming. And there's always something to take away. So I'd say probably the biggest thing for me was the focus on communication is really high. And I know that Major Keeper had also mentioned that. You're going to have to think about how you're reporting these things to media, how you're reporting these things to legal, how you're reporting these things to interagency partners, how you're reporting these things to international partners. And it really kind of keeps you on your toes with all the different ways that you need to disseminate information and technical information and the different recipients. So I think that was one of the biggest takeaways for me.
I'll be brief. Because it encompasses so much. When you're through improving, you're through. That's why we need these.
So, as all these folks articulated, definitely the biggest takeaway for me, even when you think you've prepared enough, you can always prepare more. So, I will definitely take that to heart for future iterations of this. And definitely the ability to have the experienced technical person with 10, 20 years experience sitting next to or in close proximity to the next generation of students is definitely something that this exercise allowed them to collaborate on problem sets that they would have never gathered that experience. Couple that with sitting a DHS person next to, an Army person next to a DISA person and having the three of them work through a problem set together. The networking was probably the biggest benefit to this exercise overall, both vertically and horizontally.
So I'm going to invite folks up for questions. Before I do that, I want to remind you of two things. The first thing is, if you wouldn't mind, please scanning your badge at the back to let us know that you attended today, and let AFCEA know you'd like to see more things like this in the future. That's number one. And number two, there is an entire track of forging partnerships to win, mission support, empowering the workforce, types of panels that are going on, talking about people analytics and process automation, talking about reskilling, upskilling, and retraining, talking about branding, employment branding and talent acquisition, and security clearances and contract requirements, all sorts of things. Check your program, but these mission support tracks are located in room 324 and 325 upstairs. Lastly, tomorrow from 10 to 2:45, there will be a career fair up in room 326. Polish up your resume if you are interested in joining the wonderful DISA team. Please go ahead.
I don't think the scanner was working, by the way, for at least some period of time. It may be now, but
okay.
Just a note. Tim Dixon with Splunk. Having been a tactical planner in red flag exercises and operated at a very tactical level in the Air Force, doing that kind of thing, I know that there are some times when you encounter things that you weren't expecting. Can you talk anything about maybe like a saboteur aspect or insider threat type possibility or scenarios that came up in the exercise?
So how far are we allowed to go into TTPs? I think the CCDCOE protects some of that, and they put sort of a kibosh on us sharing some of the specifics.
Not asking for specifics, more so just kind of the generalities about, was our light bulb moment, was there something that you weren't expecting and was a revelation, aha, that kind of thing. Can you talk about that?
So yes, the exercise in and of itself does a good job of exercising various components of threat in that capacity. And yes, a lot of folks were quick to identify some of that and just do simple access control limitations once enough indicators and evidence was collected that would lead to the eventual conclusion of an insider threat. But yes, that was exercise also.
I mean, from the CTF point of view, where we were doing smaller challenges built into the main, there was a lot of aha moments that we were like, we should have been tracking this. We should have been pulling these throughout the entire exercise. Wish we could go back in time to turn back the clock to do that, but can't now. And, missed a few points here and there because we hadn't done that initial step. So definitely something to improve on next year.
Hi. So I'm glad I ran into this conference. My name's Edie Bridges. I work for JFHU Doden, so right next door. I'm a cyberspace operations planner, and I do a bit of the engagement piece, partnerships with our allies. I'm involved with Cyber Coalition, and that's NATO's DCO exercise. And so I'm definitely tracking lock shields, but where is the integration, if there is at all? Right?
So next year, I believe Del Foster is taking over from a JFHQ Doden perspective. You said you were from JFHQ Doden?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think there will be increased integration from the DISA JFHQ Doden perspective. This year we did have several participants from JFHQ Doden actually attend and participate in the exercise.
Yeah, so I'm interested in understanding if there is at all any integration between Cyber Coalition and Lock Shield, because I feel like there's a lot of lessons learned that we could take from like a tactical level exercise. It's kind of based on a range with Lock Shield, but there's also a range aspect to Cyber Coalition that takes place in Estonia on Estonia's cyber range. So there's a lot of maybe seems like duplication of efforts where maybe if there's like a sharing of lessons learned. I know that Lock Shield is it's like a graded exercise. It's been referred to as, where Cyber Coalition is more like, come as you are. We're not going to grade you. There's a lot more nations that participate in Cyber Coalition. I believe this year it's like 22.
We had 38 in Lock Shields this year.
Oh, well, that's all of them plus them.
Yes.
So, but I just feel like if there was a mechanism to share lessons learned between the two exercises, that would be helpful.
So to answer your question, at the European command level, that's where we kind of gotten our guidance from, because they're the folks that asked us to be a part of Lock Shields. As for better integration, there is room for improvement with that. I do know CCDCOE is obviously involved with Cyber Coalition also, so that's something that I know we can definitely improve integration with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Roland Hansen from SimSpace. So I think one of my favorite parts from being active duty and taking part in international exercises was that camaraderie that you got to build with partner nations. I heard a lot of talk, academia, interagency, DoD. Can you talk at all about the, maybe relationships and stuff that you formed with other nations, partner nations, and stuff of that nature?
Absolutely.
Both last year and this year.
Yeah.
So this year we had our Romanian counterparts with us, and they were absolutely wonderful, very kind, and extremely knowledgeable. Two of which were more Linux side, and then also One was legal, and then I believe one of them was on the public affairs side of things. And they just jumped right in and joined us and started doing. And that was the most impressive thing on my part, was I just saw them go, okay, where do I fit in? And then they took a seat and they provided an extreme amount of value.
As we talked about earlier, real quick, the nations do take this exercise very seriously. The European Union ones are very competitive. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago we partnered with the country of Poland, and it was still the same blue team lead, the officer in charge, Colonel, and I wished him well wishes this third year in a row. And so yes, the relationship maintains there because it is a small community. Last year we were supposed to partner with the country of Ukraine, but due to international events, that precluded us from partnering with them, and we operated unilaterally. So this was the first year that we reunited with Partner Force, and that's one of the good things about us keeping everything unclassified for these exercises, is we're able to share freely and keep everything on the commercial side. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, or good morning, I guess still. Greg Carper. I'm actually a former Maryland Army National Guard Partnership for Peace exchange officer who went through the Estonian Special Operations course about a decade and a half ago. My question to you is related to kind of the contractor participation in the exercise. Now in industry, the company I work for does a lot of the defensive cyber operations and cyber forensics on the ground in Europe today, and we work directly with the J2 and the G2s in Europe, and with the 6s at the Regional Cyber Center Europe, as well as the USERA G2 intelligence activity over there that we support. So I was just curious, and I know I just heard an answer. Part of my question was you kept it at the unclassified level. I almost feel like you're probably missing out on opportunity because of the actual real-world mission and being engaged with that with the coalition partners. So I'm just curious if in the future you're looking at integrating more with some of their standing exercises that they have, where you could bring in a broader audience. And then the second part of my kind of comment or question is we also support through DISA the MPE program, Mission Partner Enterprise, on the ground in Estonia and the Baltics today at the company I work for. And I'm just curious, was there any integration with the technology that the coalition partners are using, the 38 countries that have adopted that platform? Over.
So we did not have exposure to what the other teams were using. Everything was kept isolated and compartmentalized within your own team. So whether other teams were using that platform, I cannot say. Most likely I would say yes, because they do leverage a lot of their own organic and native tools and architectures that they have for self-defense through their national centers. A lot of these folks were operating, these teams were their national response teams that were being exercised. To answer some of your other questions, how things were interchangeably leveraged through some of the other compartmentalized systems. The Lock Shields environment is scenario-driven, fictitious. So I would be curious to see where you would see integrations there. So with real-world stuff, because even though they model the attacks and campaigns of the red team off real-world stuff, none of the infrastructure is real-world mission systems. They're simulated, partially hardware, mostly software and virtualized systems like IP.
Awesome.
Good morning, I'm Bobby Westerman from KBR. We are the sponsor of DISA in Columbia, Maryland. And more of a suggestion than a question, if you identified any tools or capability gaps that might have helped you with Lock Shields 23, please lean on us to go and help you find those things.
DISA is the innovation?
Yes, with the Emerging Technologies Directorate.
With emerging technologies.
So we work hand in hand with you guys. If there's any top-level type capabilities, we're happy to help you get after that.
Perfect, thank you.
And, go right ahead.
Mike Murphy with SimSpace. A few questions. I was curious, from a logistics standpoint, it sounded like you were remote, but were you all in the same physical location as a team? And then also was curious, how did you perform last year versus this year in terms of place?
So last year we came in 15th. This year we came in 17th.
Oh, okay.
So it was about even. Our legal team did 3rd place last year. They came in 7th this year.
Okay.
And what we've seen is across the board a lot more competition and all teams increasing their abilities equally across the space.
It looks like the Nordics have it locked up.
And it should be noted that it's not a static exercise. Correct me if I'm wrong, but how can I say this without saying it? If you are on an even progression, the host may actually send an attack to trip you up. So it's not a pre-planned, pre-executed environment. It's an organic environment where the adversary will meet you where you are. Does that make sense? Am I saying that without saying it?
So, yeah, in a lot of ways, the environment can change at a switch. They can, if you're doing very well, they can revert everything in their boxes back to the very weak and fragile original state that they were in after you've done all your hardening. Coupled with that, there's usually significant change to the total infrastructure every year. Some things do stay static, a couple things, but year over year, there's enough significant change to where you kind of have to rework and rethink your strategy.
Got it. Thank you.
At the when you go through the calculation, 17, but recent media shows 16, so I'll go with 16. There was significant improvement year over year for the U.S. team. The beauty of this is that it's supposed to improve NATO's. Everybody else also had significant year over year improvement, so you got to feel good about that.
Yes.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Sam Stolzoff from ECS Federal. We have a foothold in the artificial intelligence and machine learning services to the United States government. This is a really great presentation, and the question that I have is how was artificial intelligence and machine learning leveraged, if at all, if anybody could address that?
It was.
That's about all you can say.
Actually, we worked and piloted with Mixed Mode, who's standing in the back. We worked some of their platforms into it. One of the things, there's only 2 days of red team attacks, so there is limited time to learn activities on the network. So there was, some unique things there, but we did leverage it, and we did look at net flow and network traffic across the board. So we did leverage some of the artificial intelligence capabilities coming to market.
The question is, was there any added value to employing those solutions?
I definitely agree it gave us insights that we didn't have, and it closed some gaps. What we want to do this year is, now that we've got time, is maybe learn it a little bit, take more time to fully understand the utilization of it, because we did not meet the organization but the last minute. So a lot of folks were just learning right days before the exercise on what the capability could provide. So that's one of our takeaways is this year. We definitely want to get folks exposed to these systems earlier in the process. And I think now we finally have the mechanisms and the resourcing capabilities to do that, versus just getting things last minute on the fly and working with it.
I would, and Bill, I don't know if this has actually happened or not. If we have everything recorded that happened, if digitally we've recorded this stuff on a couple teraflop disks, I'd love to go back and do a post-mortem and see if we had employed different technologies, could it have improved our situation in a few cases, particularly from an AI standpoint. But we can only really do that if we actually captured and recorded all the data, and then use that data to learn going forward.
Next year's exercise.
Yes.
And with that, I'd like to thank you, panel, for your participation today and your information sharing. And thank you to the audience for your questions and your attendance. Enjoy TechNet 23.